Hello and welcome everybody to this webinar on organised by the Foundation for Integrated Transport on learning from Europe. We've got some really good speakers to talk about this, and we've got an opportunity for you to, those of you that are listening to this, to interact with this, um, and to put, you can put questions in the chat in on this channel, and we will do our best to address them. Can I ask for the slides, the introductory slides, please? Let's see. Thank you. So this is about the Foundation for Integrated Transport, and the foundation was set up by Dr. Simon Norton, who was a brilliant mathematician and brilliant transport campaigner, based a lot of the time in Cambridge, but more generally. And this statement is one of his beliefs, that people without access to private motor vehicles have just as much right as everyone else to get around. Next slide, please. So this is Simon's vision, a world where humans have the right to get around without a car. People can travel with minimum impact on other people's lives and the environment. Trains and buses are integrated, and safe and attractive routes are provided for walking and cycling, and barriers to transport justice are removed by means which include volunteering and social enterprise. Next slide, please. So this is, the foundation has been going since 2014. We have refreshed strategy when Simon sadly died in 2019, and again more recently. And the way we work is in sort of four categories. We do grants, which are about promoting and delivering transport as a basic right, and that reduces transport emissions that contribute to climate change. We do smaller grants as well, £2,000 to support running costs of local campaigns and grassroots groups. We've done social investment, repayable loans and equity investments in projects and innovations. And we've also have funded fellowships to develop the skills and experience of transport activists and researchers. You can find more details about this on our website. Next slide, please. And these are some of our funding recipients, literally from north to south. Scottish Royal and Islands Transport Community, who are currently working on ferries, and through to the West Country, Reclaim Our Buses, and West of England, and also national organisations as well. Next slide, please. So in order to find out what we're doing, you can visit our website. You can follow us on LinkedIn, where we will post quite a lot about what we're up to. And we also now have a newsletter which you can sign up to. For this event, we're going to hear from one of our grantees and two of our fellows. Jonathan Bray, who has been doing work on what we can learn from European countries and cities and city regions. Roger Clarke, who's representing Hope Valley Climate Action, which is busy pursuing a project, a mini Switzerland project, seeing how it would be possible to bring Swiss-style integrated public transport to the Hope Valley in the Peak District. And Beate Kubitz, who's a previous fellow of FIT and who has been doing work on how people travel around cities, and actual travel patterns, and is as well as a social entrepreneur who, among other things, set up the cargo bike scheme in the Pennines. So we're going to hear from Jonathan and first, and then from Roger, and then Beate will respond to those. So I'd like to ask Jonathan to share his slides and to talk about the work he's been doing, looking at European countries and the lessons we can learn from them. Jonathan.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Let me see, share my slides. Is that working okay?
That's absolutely fine. Thank you.
Yeah. Good. Right. So I have been lucky enough to be a fellow for the last year doing a project around decarbonising transport in suburbs. And part of that, I've been going to see things for myself in different parts of Europe. Because the focus of this event is around learning from Europe, I've broadened it out from suburbs. But I think one of the interesting things we're going to do today is not focus so much on city centres of very large cities, the Londons and Parises of this world, but look at other places and what can be achieved there. So I'm going to do that through the magic carpet ride of PowerPoint and visit three places. Orléans in France, about reinventing small city public transport. Kortrijk, about reinventing streets. And Utrecht, you can never do enough when you're saying these names, apparently, around the civic imperative. So Orléans, small, equivalent, the city itself, just a bigger city hinterland, but the city itself, equivalent size to Crawley, Gloucester, Basingstoke or Basildon. I'm not sure any of us can imagine a tram coming to those places anytime soon. But Orléans got one, and it's a beauty. That's the cathedral's classic view of what they've done there on that boulevard. And the tram is really the heartbeat of the wider public transport network and the city itself. The other thing is the design of the streets, the design of the trams, the design of the whole cityscape is one and the same thing. It was a winter's day, so it's not glowing as much as it might do, but you can see there's a kind of colour palette there that extends from the buildings to the trams to the streets, and also, perhaps you can see a bit better on the next slide. You can see it's all kind of one thing. There's not a lot of barriers between the pavement and where the tram goes and the greenery. That picture on the left is a green section, which is a bit out of the city centre. And then the picture on the right, we're back in the city centre, and that next to the cathedral is one of the city administration buildings. You could practically walk out of the tram straight into the front door of the city authority. Alongside the trams, what they've gone for is the current rock star, I say, of bus design. It's not just another shouty shoebox covered in adverts. I say this is something you'd actually want on your city streets. It looks good. So they're introducing these vehicles. Now, for the low density areas and the peripheral employment sites, there's an extensive network of demand responsive vehicles. And you may not be able to see all this, and we won't go through it all, but we'll circulate these slides. The thing about the DRT operation in Orléans, some key points is that you can't use the demand responsive transport vehicles to go to the city centre. They feed into the tram and the main bus corridors. It's quite an extensive operation, fleet of 36 vehicles, and more than most vehicles have more than one person using them. It's not true door to door. It has specific stops to pick up, and they started a meaningful pilot and then worked their way up. And the objective is to put everyone within the city area within 500 metres of a public transport service. A lot of use by pre-driving age young people. Is it going to save the planet? Is it going to be a revolution and get rid of normal buses? None of those are the reasons why we're doing this. It's part of their wider network, and it's to provide that greater access as part of a wider civic offer. And this map, again, you might not be able to see very clearly, but there's four quarters there. There's a light brown, a pink, a green, and a blue. And those are the areas where the DRT operates. The bit in the centre is pretty well served by normal public transport. So it's complementing that. It's part of that wider network. And I think what you see in Orléans is, as I say, they're not going, yes, it's going to create 10,000 jobs and it's going to save the planet. They're looking at public transport as a civic utility, as a city enhancer, as a public service, and they're doing it with dignity and flair and quality and creativity. The tram's the heartbeat. The city design is the same as the transport design, and the DRT fits in around that. And so lessons there, small cities can do big things. There's an issue around pilots and scaling. What scale of pilot is meaningful? And then have you designed it to scale up? And also it's about transport. It's not just getting people from A to B. It actually determines what A and B look and feel like, as you can see there in the pictures of the city centre. That's Orléans. Kortrijk. We'll focus in on Kortrijk in terms of reinventing streets in a skillful way. So Kortrijk, you may not have heard of it. I hadn't until I went. Population 80,000, not that big, 20th in population terms in Belgium. It's near the French and Wallonian border. So it's in the Dutch part of Belgium. When I first arrived in Kortrijk, the evening, so I thought I'd go to the football. There's a match on. The stadium is in the inner city area. It's not on the outskirts, not the city centre. And I was blown away by how many people were cycling there. If you look at the slide on the right, that isn't all the cycle parking. There's a lot more than that. So that was in big contrast to when I went to doing some work in Wales. I was in Newport. Not that dissimilar, I guess, in population size. I haven't checked it out, but and I also went to the football because it was better marginally than spending the evening in the hotel room. And I was queuing for a ticket behind a guy, and he said, "I've come by bike. Is there somewhere I can park it?" And that completely flummoxed the woman who was selling the ticket. She had to ask around the office about what should happen in this most unusual circumstance. So that is a comparison for you. Now, one of the things I really liked about Kortrijk in terms of reinventing the streetscape was these things called Fietsstraat. And what they are is streets where cars cannot overtake cyclists. Cyclists can occupy whatever amount of the street space they want. They can go down the middle as a single person or in a flotilla of bikes. And in the city centre, there's also a 30 km/h speed limit. And they've done this alongside pedestrianisation. They were the first city in Belgium to do pedestrianisation. So they've got that. But all the city centre, if it's not pedestrianised, is Fietsstraat. And I liked it because I think one of the challenges with pedestrianisation, if you've got a lot of it, it can be not much footfall. They can be a bit clattering deserts. And also you get sacrifice streets where the traffic that can't go on the pedestrianised bits goes. Here there are no sacrifice streets, and you're keeping the variety of life and vehicles still able to get into the city centre. And it extended to the suburbs too. There's a lower speed limit to 20 km/h. And you've also got school streets where close to vehicle traffic at the start and end of the day. And I like when I go to these places, not just look at the city centre. I want to see if it stretches out into the suburbs, and it does in Kortrijk. So on the right is a random bit of street in low density suburbia, and what they've done there, as you can see, is they've put in this cycle lane and organise the parking in that way. And it's really horses for courses the way they organise those streets. That's what they've chosen to do in this particular street. On the left, you can see the bicycles, which are kind of sensible Dutch-style bicycles. You can hire those for €4 a day. And when I say hire them, that's the actual bike. You get to keep the bike for the whole day. None of this putting it in an area and hoping there's one when you need it when you come back. You get the bike for the day for €4. It's a normal human being's bike. They also have a loan system for kids' bikes for €20 a day, and loans for job seekers for mopeds and electric bikes. These are perhaps not so unusual to British eyes, but residents can request these cycle parking facilities. These are the the high quality ones, which will cost you 60 euros a year. These are the more basic ones, which will cost you 50 euros a day. So communities request these and then they're put in. On the left, you can see a very fancy new bit of cycle infrastructure. That's where they're regenerating the area around the river, and that's a cycle bridge. They've got this nice signing. I like it, nice and clear and bright. And then shop and go, I thought was interesting because rather than have some shouty notice about parking restrictions and all the rules, they're all there, but they're putting what the purpose of this is. It's a bit more human in terms of saying it's for shopping and go short-term parking. And again, this is very random. People may have different views. I liked it. I know the cycle lane needs a bit of refurbishing there, but you can see how they've reduced the road space for cars. They've got some nice light columns there. On the right, they've got some kiss and go parking for schools. Belgium is the home of the cartoon, and therefore they've got a cartoon at the top there, which I quite like, but there might be other views. So, and you can see on the left different arrangements for different kinds of parking. So, and this is in a normal suburban environment, and the street space for through vehicles obviously has been drastically reduced from what it was. So, what could you learn from Kortrijk? Again, small places can do some really interesting things. Right tactics for right streets. There's a strong identity. It's public sector led. They're trying to push all the buttons. Again, is it leading to a massive modal shift? Is it getting rid of the car? No, it is not. There's a massive underground car park. But again, I want to come back to this. Why are people doing things a bit later on? We'll return to that subject. Right, Utrecht. Yeah, so we are returning to that subject of the civic imperative, as I've called it. Right, must speed up. So Utrecht, population 350,000, looking to grow to 455,000 in the next 20 years. And we're going to do that by going polycentric. They're going to create also new communities, not just add housing to the periphery. It's a very cozy city, but it's also quite buzzy. It's going to go a sweet spot. Pictures better than words. So let's go on a little tour of some lovely things in Utrecht. This is a fairly inner area. There's some people who are just eating outside with their friends in a street. Imagine that. Super diverse city, 10-minute city they call it, quite a young city, university city. Here's a former railway line, disused, made it into a quite amazingly beautiful park. They have lots of canals. It is the Netherlands, and that boat is delivering the beer and the drinks to the bars. So the beer is coming in by barge, and I tested that out thoroughly, and all works very well. This is the most amazing cycle lane I've ever been on. More widely, Utrecht has the busiest cycle lane in the Netherlands. This isn't it. It also has the biggest bike park on the entire planet. But this is amazing. This cycle lane, you can see it loops round from the right-hand side, loops round and then goes around the left there. And it goes over the top of an infant school, when it curves again, and then it goes over a brand new road for cyclists and pedestrians over the river. And it was quite a joyous experience, really, because little kids were giving high fives as you go past. But I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And again, it shows this kind of creativity and also the way that transport is linking with other functions. And here on the left, that's the same viewpoint just about. And you can tell because the church is in both pictures. Originally, it was a canal. Then it became that horrible road, and now it's a canal again. And the canal actually also goes right under the new shopping mall a bit further towards us, which has been located right next to the station. Yeah, so what's motivating to do that? Well, you can see there their 10-minute city strategy and their social vision. There's nothing really so much about what we would have there about growth or what have you. Focus on security of existence, a roof above your head, growing up with opportunities and living healthy together. So again, these are kind of civic values more than they are the kind of stuff we tend to focus on. And I thought this quote kind of summed up this approach. It's not actually from the Netherlands or Utrecht, it's from Germany. And I think that kind of sums up this different starting point that there is. The key bit here, I think, is probably in Germany, for the secondary consideration to things such as environment, transformation of urban areas, improving the quality of life for residents, and economic benefits would then follow indirectly, which kind of is intuitively correct, but I think it's well summed up there. So what are some of the lessons overall? The Yeah, so I think it's about in the case in different ways. It's about trying to do everything all at once, and also recognizing that everything links to everything else. So climate resilience, transport, housing, taking that more holistic view. It's about having empowered and confident transport authorities pursuing this idea of how can we make a good urban life. It was interesting as well on the next point when I was at a conference in Utrecht, the British presentations that there were tended to start off with all their strategies and all their process stuff, where the stuff from places like the Netherlands didn't start there. It started from a more human approach around the city, the nature of the city, and what they wanted to do, and this idea of learning by doing, of failing better every time, a bit more prominent than you would get here, I would argue. And this other thing is diversity is a core strength of cities. Interesting that the person from Utrecht, or one of them, said that their greatest strength was the diversity of the population, which in the current context of the politics we have at the moment was refreshing to hear. But they kind of meant it as well. And that also feeds through into trying to get broader views and get wider representation inside the authority to represent the diversity of the cities. I don't think it was Utrecht, but I think it was Malmo, where they had a target for how they were going to change their city planning department in terms of the makeup of that planning department in order to it reflects the diversity of the place they serve, because they saw super diversity as a real strength. So conclusions. I think, when am I supposed to finish? Is it 1 o'clock?
You've got another couple of minutes.
Well, a couple of minutes, right? Okay. Well, I'm on the last little bit here. So here's what I've put out as 5 things to think about. I thought about as a result of the European trips I've been making, research I've been doing. The first of which is about what are you actually trying to achieve, and where do you start from? And I think the cities I went to before I went, I almost expected them to take a very similar approach, but it wasn't really. They were pretty good at looking at where the starting point was, what their strengths are, and what it was they were trying to achieve. Just skip forward to this slide, because I think all those we sometimes use as a reason for doing something, and there are overlaps, but they are not the same. And I think sometimes we're not clear enough about what our starting point is and what is it we are trying to achieve. I think shiny things, by that I mean there are things like ability to service, mobility hubs, autonomous vehicles, e-scooters, Uber, AI, all these things come up. And there's a tendency sometimes for people to grab at them. There's some funding available. They want to make a splash. They want to look good. I'm not saying don't do these things. What I am saying is it goes back to what are you trying to do, and will they work in the context that you're in? And I think thinking through the road of shiny things rather than grabbing at them is one of the key to successes. Scale, as I said before, it's about having pilots of doing new things at a meaningful level. So it's actually going to show you something. If you do one mobility hub, 2 mobility hubs, it's probably not big enough to show you anything. But if you do, say, Tenneso, then maybe you've got something which will tell you more about what you do if you do the entire city. And you can see that with DRT in Orléans. You can see at the moment in Berlin, where they're aiming to bring in mobility hubs throughout the entire city off the basis of what they've done already. So there's that issue. And then there's the culture of the organisations. I think that was something that struck me as well, talking to some of these city authorities. Often they had one person there who was well embedded, who'd been pursuing a project for some time in a supportive culture where there was more of a let's kind of just try it approach. And also smaller authorities potentially have that advantage. I think there's also a culture of civic entrepreneurialism. There's that leeway, there's that trust, there's that motivation and longevity of staff, that you have this kind of entrepreneurialism, but that's not entrepreneurialism about make as much money as possible. It's about ideas and doing in a civic way. And I think finally, I think what some of these cities have been quite smart at is how can you establish something so it becomes part of what our city is and does. And I think that makes it easier to survive backlashes, because once you've established that, say, Bremen does car share, or of course it does pedestrianisation for extras, whatever it may be, it's part of your civic identity. It's less this novelty that then when there's a backlash that people can have a go at it. So how can you make whatever you're doing the thing that your city does that's associated with your place, that people can be proud of and can't really imagine it being taken away because of the nature of our city. So I think, is that me done? Yes, that is me done. So a lot to go at, and I'm aiming to bring it all together in the suburbs paper that will emerge before too long.
Jonathan, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for getting us started on this. As I've said, you are welcome to put comments and questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to address them at the end. So that's got us off to a very good start. What I'd now like to do is to ask Roger Clarke from Hope Valley Climate Action to do his presentation. If that's okay.
Thanks very much, Stephen, and good to see everybody, and very grateful to Foundation for Integrated Transport for assistance with our Switzerland in the Peak District project. Really like what Jonathan was saying about it's all linked and just do it. And that's what we're trying to do in a specific local area, but something with, we hope, relevance across the country. So our vision is the Swiss have the best rural public transport system in the world. And I'll say a bit more about that in a minute. But how could that be relevant? How could it be applied in a rural area in the UK? And so that's the task we've set ourselves, not just thinking about how it could be applied, but actually working with public authorities to apply it in the area. So the Swiss have the best rural public transport system in the world. What's the Swiss system about? Next, please. We have the next slide. Thank you. Many of you will be familiar with aspects of the Swiss system, and it's multifaceted. It is not a single solution, but those are some of the main features of the Swiss system. And I'll go through each of those in turn. Next, please. First of all, Swiss rural public transport is universal. It reaches pretty much anywhere that you might want to go. All villages with a population of 300 or more, all the major visitor attractions, and services run from early in the day till late in the evening, and at a minimum of once an hour. And as you will probably aware, the Swiss have They're famous for clocks, so they've, I think, been big pioneers of a clock-faced timetable so that predictability, the service runs at the same time every hour. Next, please. So universal provision, and then connectivity is the next thing. Buses and trains join up, not simply as the transport planned as a single system, but delivered as a single system. So at main train stations, the bus and the train is adjacent. And this is this particular picture, St. Moritz in the Engadine, southeast Switzerland. The train ends here, the buses radiate from here. And not simply they join up in a physical sense, but they're planned and delivered a single timetable for bus and train. Next, please. Integrated ticketing. Don't worry too much about the complex and nature of the diagram. The important point is that you buy your ticket, but it's valid on the bus and the train interchangeably. You don't have to worry about, am I on the right bus? Am I on the right train? If it's going there, your ticket is valid for that journey. Different providers, and you will see from this 3 different providers, 3 different bus providers and 1 rail provider, but 1 ticket gets you there. And for many Swiss, over I think half the population, buy an annual annual half fare card. And once you've paid a significant sum of Swiss francs to get your card, you're then incentivized to use the bus and the train so that it becomes part of what you do. And 1 brand, as you can see, different buses, different trains, Engadine Mobile, the brand used by the public authorities in the area to market a single system. Next, please. And then a blend of important things: quality, reliability, good information. Good quality modern buses. The Swiss are renowned for things running to time. They don't always, but most of the time it's pretty reliable. Excellent information. Where's the bus got to? One of the puzzles in rural Britain at the moment, but the Swiss have got that taped. You know, you can find out easily where the bus is. And then excellent publicity. It can be difficult in the UK, particularly for visitors, to understand public transport systems and particularly bus systems. For the Swiss, good quality publicity is really important, both for orientated towards visitors and orientated towards local people. And in many rural areas in Switzerland, the travel becomes an important part of the visitor experience and is marketed like that. Next, please. So translating that into the situation in the UK and working with colleagues, national transport experts, Thomas Abelman and Nigel Hutton, and an increasing number of people nationally have taken interest in what we're doing locally. Our vision, let's do it here. And not simply in the Hope Valley, which would be very nice, but as part of a pattern of mini Switzerland projects across the country where you look at connectivity within a local area and think about how can we do it. So our vision is not simply a local one in Derbyshire, but is something that could apply throughout the UK. Our objectives as a climate organisation, obviously our interest is in reducing emissions from private vehicles. But alongside that, the sorts of things we're interested in can also improve the quality of life, improve public health, improve a sense of well-being for local people, and provide access to people that might not be able to access places because they don't have a car. So next, please. So where's the Hope Valley? Well, many of you have visited the Hope Valley when you've been on holiday. Some of you might even live here. Between Manchester and Sheffield, at the heart of the Peak District National Park. So Manchester is off to the left side there, Sheffield just appearing on the top right. An area which is served by the Manchester-Sheffield rail line, which is a great asset. Not all rural areas have that. But with that, we have a very large number of visitors. Nobody knows quite how many, but something like 3 to 5 million visits a year. Most of them day visitors, most of them travelling from Manchester and Sheffield, 90% of the visitors coming by car. The area has, as I mentioned, the rail line with 5 stations along the line, and then about 8 villages, depending a bit how you count them. Total distance from one end to the other, about 30 kilometres, 20 miles, if that, and total population of about 10,000 people. Next, please. What do we got now? Train service, great to have it, hourly, and following in part through our lobbying over the recent years, we now have pretty much a clock face hourly service, which is great, stopping at all 5 stations rather than a previous rather intermittent service. Questions about its reliability. Northern, I think, are embarrassed by the lack of reliability, and the service on Saturdays and particularly on Sundays is limited, which is the time when many visitors want to come to the area. But because of the improvements over the last 10 years, and particularly the level of service and the quality of rolling stock, usage has more or less doubled at many of our stations over the past 10 years. So the demand for trains, the use of the train has increased dramatically. Next, please. Not quite the same with our buses. We've got 5 operators in our tiny area. They do their best. There are some commercial services, other tendered services, but the bus network is fragmented. Next, please. The equivalent of that dense network you saw for the Upper Engadine in Switzerland, we're looking at a pretty similar bit of geography in terms of its extent and its population here in the Hope Valley, but our services are pretty limited. Services at weekends are poor or non-existent, particularly the buses. There is no connection at all between the bus and the train. The services, and I feel for the operators, but often bus operators are operating old vehicles, poor quality, limited reliability, and publicity in most cases is pretty woeful. Next, please. So where are we looking to get to? This is an outline. We've been modelling the kind of service that we might want if we had a Swiss-style service here, that it would be more comprehensive. Next, please. So looking through those, remember those 4 characteristics of the Swiss system from a few minutes ago. First of all, it would be universal coverage, so that we would have a service at least hourly to all the places that people might want to go, both local people and visitors. And 7 days a week, remembering that much of our present public transport is limited on Sundays, but the highest level of demand from our visitors is for weekend travel, and particularly for day visits. We recognise that not everywhere is universally popular right through the day and into the evening, so there seems to be some level of seasonal flexibility, time of week flexibility, and time of day flexibility, particularly to visitor destinations where you wouldn't want to go to a place when it's dark and wet in November, where you might want to visit there on a summer Saturday or Sunday evening. Next, please. Connectivity. I mentioned that our buses and trains don't join up at all at the moment. That's not quite true. We've got some experiment at Edale where, following some campaigning from us, the Transport Authority has introduced a new trial service, the 62 between Buxton and Castleton via Edale Station, and aims to connect with the Manchester train service from Edale, which is great. But by and large, we have very limited connectivity at the moment. There's some potential at each of the 5 stations for saying, yeah, the bus can link with the train, but we're looking to see, as part of the project, connectivity develop, particularly either at Bamford or at Hope stations, the 2 of our stations in the middle of the Hope Valley, and which one depends a bit on what money is available for capital investment. But at each of them, we would need to create a proper bus turnaround and then think about timings. One of the key features of the Swiss system is you start with your rail service, you've got your hourly clock face service, you then plan the bus services around the trains, and then you think about, well, where's the bus going to wait? It arrives before the train does, then leaves after the train has departed. Moving on. Next, please. So we're still thinking about fares and how you might best do it. The Swiss system, building on the Swiss system, we think the best option at present would be an all-day, all-bus ticket for travellers throughout the Hope Valley area, and then using Plus Bus to provide rail travellers with an inexpensive add-on so that they could use the buses seamlessly as part of their rail ticket. We're still thinking about the Swiss season ticket and visitor card systems. We don't have so many staying visitors, whereas many Swiss destinations will have a high number of staying visitors, where as part of your accommodation package, you may well receive a visitor card which enables you to travel on all the public transport in the area. We like something like that here. It might make the area more attractive for staying visitors and boost our tourist industry, and we're still thinking about how that might work. Next, please. The final Swiss point, Swiss style quality, reliability, publicity. Be great to have it here. Quality, we've got it with our trains. We need reliability. We need both quality and reliability with our buses. Information, there's a long way to go. We've got the emerging real-time information displays in different parts of the Hope Valley at present, but they don't display real-time information at all. They simply display the timetable, which is worse than useless, because when your bus doesn't come, it disappears from the display, and you've no idea whether it's ever going to turn up unless you are good at using an app and can find out where it's got to. So we need better information about what's happened to the bus, and the displays incorporating both bus and rail information as part of the real-time information display. And then we need, in conjunction with the Visit Peak District Derbyshire Tourist Organisation, much better publicity about where's the bus, where's the train, how do you use it, what sorts of tickets are available. So that, in a way, is the vision being translated into the detail. Next, please. This is the final slide, but really most important, and you can help today because it's work in progress. We're still working on all this stuff, and your ideas, your reaction can help us develop the project further. So what's the institutional landscape within which we're working? Bearing in mind back what I said at the start, we're looking for a Hope Valley demonstrator, Switzerland in the Peak District, as part of what we hope will be a national program of mini Switzerland pilots. And we're looking to a 5-year demonstration, which we hope will be led by the East Midlands Mayoral Authority. Those of you close to the democratic geography, we know we have a new East Midlands Mayoral Authority as of last year, covering the former, bringing together the Nottingham, Derby City, Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire County Councils in a single combined authority, with an elected mayor, Claire Ward, Labour, now working with 2 reform-led county councils, a bit of a political nightmare. And they, through their transport powers, have the capacity to deliver what we're looking for. Also important players. A lot of our transport runs to and from Sheffield and South Yorkshire, and the Mayor has formed a peak partnership with Andy Burnham in Greater Manchester and Oliver Coppard, the South Yorkshire Mayor, to look at improvements in the way in which things are planned for the Peak District as a whole and transport in particular. And we're hoping that the three mayors will pick up this project as one of their flagship projects through the emerging Peak Partnership. It's timely because the Mayor has just published consultation on her local transport plan and is looking for bold ideas to make the transport plan not simply incremental but transformational change. We think this will be the ideal project as part of the local transport plan, and particularly a demonstration of what you can do for rural travel. And along with that, the Mayor is taking over bus service arrangements from Derbyshire County Council and the other constituent authorities during the course of the next few months, and is creating her own bus service improvement plan. This obviously, particularly the bus service elements, fits within that. Then in the background, we've got DFT working on the INTS and what we hope will be a delivery program to accompany it. And in passing, we're talking to transport operators about how this might all work in practice. So from our end, I'd hoped we'd have something to say today beyond we're working on it, but within the next month, we hope to publish both a summary brochure about the project and also a full report setting out in detail through the work of Nigel Hutton, supplemented by volunteers on our national expert group, about how it might work in detail, what the bus schedules would look like, how the interchange points would function, and what the costs and the benefits would be. Because obviously we're looking not simply for a better system, but a system that's much better used than our existing more limited network. So we hope within the next month to publish our report, our brochure, setting out how it might work. I met the Mayor, Claire Ward, yesterday at an event in Bakewell. She's very interested in what we're doing, and she's agreed to meet us in the Hope Valley to talk through how it might work, with a view, we hope, to the project being picked up and implemented by the mayoral authority. So really welcome your interest, your support, your ideas, lots of things we don't know, but making it work in the Hope Valley could be a really good demonstration for how this kind of approach could work throughout the country. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Roger. That's great. And I can see some questions coming in as well, and comments. I'd now like to ask Beate Kubitz, transport consultant, to just reflect on what she's heard and give some responses.
Thanks very much, Stephen, and thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, Roger, very much for your presentations. I think it was incredibly striking to see so starkly in Roger's presentation just how different the transport network is in the UK compared to Switzerland. It really made me feel quite how strongly deregulation has left the UK underserved for public transport. However you configure it, we need an organising brain that looks at transport and creates a network that actually serves people, whether it's through a legal force like in France, where you have the law that says that everyone should have mobility accessible to them that's not dependent on the car, whether it's through more technical measures, whether it's like in Orléans, which obviously is in France, but has this, everyone should be 500 metres, no more than 500 metres from public transport. We need to have those principles within the UK. And I've found it's really interesting lately that we've seen the Department for Transport looking at connectivity as a measure of how well our transport system is doing, how well people are connected. And they've published a connectivity tool, which I absolutely recommend that everyone goes and has a look at. You can, if you're not a member of a local authority, you can go to Pedaris's website and they have a viewer to this connectivity tool. So you can see how well connected the public transport is, people are by vehicles for different purposes. It's a really nice tool because it looks at education and employment and things like that. So I recommend it, but it does have a drawback. It is only benchmarking us against ourselves in the UK. And when I say us against ourselves, I'm actually being beamed in from Marseille at the moment. So I'm experiencing continental transport, and I really think that we should be looking and thinking about how we benchmark ourselves against continental Europe, against other countries. Because one of the things that I've noticed, and I need an economist to explain this to me, but when taxes in France are notoriously high, but our economy is the same size in France as in the UK, within a few percentage points. Our population is very similar, but you can see where those taxes are being spent. You can see in Orléans they are being spent on the tram. You can go and stroke the tarmac outside of my house because it is absolutely smooth as butter. It's amazing. And this is something that I really don't understand about the UK, that we seem to spend, we have a big economy, we have a popular economy, but we are not spending it on visible things that make us feel proud to be a person living in the UK and able to navigate. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of what I've done in terms of benchmarking myself, this is work in progress, so please don't hold me to it too closely. But I've looked at Orléans, like Jonathan, and I've also looked at Swindon. I didn't think of Basingstoke, and I'm afraid, but Swindon will do, similar-ish. And in Orléans, interestingly, I looked at the number of bus stops per square kilometre. I thought that's quite a good metric for, how infrastructure is distributed. And it actually only came out as 3 and a bit bus stops per kilometre square. Okay, not that much. Swindon actually has 4. So I looked again and I thought that's interesting. But what about if we take the data of using timetable data, so that it's standardized across nations, using the general transport feed specification data, which is roughly standardized between different places. How many times are those bus stops and transport stops visited? And actually, when you look at Orléans, it comes out as 1.5 times the number. Each bus stop is visited 1.5 times that at Swindon. And when you map this, the bus stops in the centre of Swindon are highly visited, but the ones on the edges are very, very infrequently visited. Whereas Orléans, there is a much more even distribution of visiting throughout the city network. And then the other thing is, Jonathan pointed out the demand responsive transport network, which is a very interesting addition to the Orléans network. And it was specifically designed to deal with places where it's hard to visit, to run fixed line buses, like edge of city employment areas that are sparse and there's big gaps between buildings, which make a dense, frequent network hard to run. And once you add in those demand responsive transport stops, where the buses only stop if there's someone there to take them, that means the bus stops are actually far denser than they are in Swindon as a whole. So they're 20% more dense, five stops per kilometre square. But it's the organisation that has gone into thinking that this is the way to deal with it, which has created this dense network. And the final thing that I really feel that we lose in the way that transport is organised in the UK compared to in Europe is through digitalisation and being able to harness all of the last mile opportunities there are these days in our transport planning and journey planning and mobility as a service apps. So in the UK, because the systems are quite fragmented, it's hard, it's expensive to create mobility as a service apps. I heard the Breeze app in Southampton, which just closed, was burning £1 million a year in costs. And part of that cost was just how fragmented the number of different services, the number of different integrations that had to be integrated in the app meant that it was an extremely expensive app to manage and run. Whereas we have in Europe, it is just de rigueur to include digitalized services in your transport planning and payment app, and to include last mile opportunities like bike share, to include demand responsive transport in Orléans. It's integrated in the app, and to harness all of the opportunities. Grenoble, for instance, because the city saw that there was a lot of car travel coming into the city centre, and they wanted to reduce the carbon footprint and the pressure on congestion. They have encouraged people to car share, and that is integrated in their mobility as a service. So lift sharing is integrated. So one of the things that we're missing out on is mobility as a service in the UK because of the fragmented nature of our transport. So those are my three reflections for discussion, and thank you again, Roger and Jonathan. I think that this is such an important discussion, and you're doing such great work.
Thanks very much, everybody. We can put links in the chat. We'll transfer them into this, and there will be the slides and other parts of this will be available on our the Foundation's LinkedIn as account after this. We have got some questions coming in. Some of them start with where Jonathan was about. So Benjamin Blackburn from Ben joining from TFGM was asking, how do you make the human-led decisions on environment and urban spaces palatable for residents and businesses in a city region with high levels of car congestion already? And he also asked about the economic case. Without the economic case, can you prove to councillors that a scheme is worthwhile? What methods are being used across Europe to change this narrative? Actually, I think, Beate, you might want to comment on the city region with high levels of car congestion as well. Jonathan, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, a few points that hopefully address in one way or another the thrust of those questions. I think the first thing is we have a different political culture than some of the countries we've been talking about, more centralised. They're not always. Some countries in the Netherlands is quite centralised. We've got a kind of unstable policy environment. People are always changing the direction of quite fundamental things or seeking to at the national level. And we've got this very strong attachment to technocracy and things like cost-benefit analysis. Even though in reality, it's a bit of a charade because politics still decides. If it was just cost-benefit analysis, we wouldn't be spending gazillions on mega road schemes with very low CBA. So it's a bit of a charade, but unless you've got raw political power, we all have to play along. I think that the devolution that's happening, including obviously in Greater Manchester, can help. I think you can see with bus regulation in Greater Manchester a kind of shift to a more social focus around local employment and building more of the buses locally. You can see that around some of the things being done around fares and inclusion. So I think that helps. I think in terms of persuasion, I think that's where we are very deficient. And it's not that there isn't opposition to a lot of things that happen in European cities. You know, you can look at France a lot, but there's been the odd protest there over things like fuel prices. But I think we're deficient in the softer skills, the persuasion skills, in terms of the skills that the transport industry values. It's very much the hard skills. It's things like finance, HR, operations. It's not social policy. It's not persuasion. It's not behavioural science. Those are seen as slightly suspect. But the problem is not that we can't build things. It's that we can't necessarily persuade people or articulate the case in a way that sticks. And I think there's a particular issue we've faced in the UK around this the opposition peaking at the point just before implementation. And what do you do then? Do you back off? Do you carry on regardless? Or do you have some kind of partial back off? And these kind of things I think we need to be thinking about much earlier, and just talking human more, and learning more about behavioural science in the transport sector. I think I've spoken to Stephen sometimes about whether this is something that FIT might explore a bit more, because I do think that's a real gap in trying to make good things happen on transport. And I think finally, I know I shut up, but I'm trying to do this as well, because I'm as guilty as anybody of speaking, or I was when I was at Urban Transport Group, because to get money, you just need to ape the language and the keywords that the government is using. You need to stay within a very narrow, there's certain language is acceptable, otherwise you may be ostracised. And a lot of this is quite marketish. So I'm trying to demarketize the way I talk about transport, because I think we all talk in this technocratic, economic this, and a lot of it doesn't is just a charade. It's not talking about what people are concerned about. So I'm in a position where I could do that, but I think we need to look at the language we use and the way we describe things, and kind of demarketize and de-economistize, whatever the word might be, the way we talk about things.
Thanks very much. And yeah, that relates to some of the other questions we've had. Beate, did you want to comment on this?
In terms of getting buy-in, I think seizing on people who actually want to make change and to make positive change is one of the ways we get buy-in. I think the Mums for Lungs campaigns in London that has been very pro congestion charging and making sure that better vehicles are used in cities and reducing damage. Because when you look at the Netherlands, that didn't happen on its own. It happened because people campaigned against child death, against children being killed by cars. It wasn't just, a magic wand was waved over the Netherlands and everyone suddenly started riding to work on canal towpaths. There's a lot of buy-in. But then the other thing is the political distribution or the distribution of political power. France has some very, very powerful mayoral authorities. So the centre of Paris, which is extremely bike friendly, the traffic has been abated in the centre of Paris. It's very, very, it's a very different city from the one that pre-COVID even. It was the one that hosted the Olympics. But that is because the mayor is powerful and she can say, no, I don't want your SUVs cluttering up my streets. I'm going to charge them more. I don't want your diesel vehicles driving down my streets. I'm going to charge you, or I'm just not going to let you in. You have to have a Critair badge. I'm going to build these bike lanes. And the people who live on the periphery in the suburbs, this is Jonathan's subject, can moan all they like about Anne Hidalgo, but they can't do anything about her because they can't vote her out of power, because she has power and she protects the interests of her citizens. Other European places the power is more distributed. So Berlin, you will get it's the wider area that has the power. So there is actually an actual fight between the outer areas, which all vote CDU. Last election were promised, if you vote CDU, you can keep your car. The suburbs, the donut voted CDU, and the intern, the centre of Berlin voted Green or Communist, and decide, so you have an actual fight between those people who don't want cars in their backyard and people who want to drive their cars at God knows how fast down into the centre of the city. And you see the similar sort of distribution of power in London, with the outer London areas transport affects elections in there. So there are two ways of looking at it. There is the campaigning and social skills and the seizing on the people who actually want to positive change, or there is no, you have a right to say, I don't want a polluting vehicle to drive down my street, and I can vote for the woman that says, I'm not going to let you do that. So those are the different approaches in continental Europe.
Thanks very much. So, Roger, sorry, I haven't brought you in at all in this. Do you want to say something about how you think this might work, and actually a bit about how it'll work in relation to the governance, because you've got the Peak District National Park and Derbyshire County Council and the East Midlands Combined Authority and so on. And I just wondered whether you know the issues of governance. One of our other fellows and grantees, Alistair Kirkbride, who runs Low Carbon Destinations, has highlighted the problems in the Lake District of different forms of governance and overlapping things. So I just wonder whether that's an issue.
Yeah, number of really important issues there. Building on what colleagues have been saying, first of all, kind of persuasion and why, and that's a particularly acute issue for us at the moment because, as I mentioned, we've now got a reform-led county council. Although they haven't quite sorted themselves out yet, you can imagine that the climate crisis is not uppermost on their agenda, and we're a climate organisation. So the sort of things we're doing are not just for climate reasons. They're about public health, quality of life, access to employment, and so on. And that translates into, well, actually, if you use public transport, if you use active travel more, your quality of life might well be better, as well as that reducing congestion. And part of the coming to a national park, the visitor experience, you want to come to a tranquil area. You don't want to come to an area that's full of traffic jams. So things which can appeal more directly to people's immediate experience rather than some of the longer range stuff about climate, which obviously is very important, but may not be uppermost in people's minds. So rethinking the message, really important. In terms of governance, the Peak Park, very supportive of what we're doing and encouraging us to press ahead, even though they're not the Transport Authority. They sit on our steering committee and are very encouraging. So what will make for good governance? I think the point that Beate made earlier about an organising mind, an organising brain, what will bring this together? And there's been quite a bit of debate in the East Midlands about our mayor wanting not to go down the bus franchising route, feeling it's all too complicated at this stage of her tenure, whereas Greater Manchester and South Yorkshire are pursuing that particular route. However it's done, it is really important that the public interest sets the direction for the way transport is organised locally, rather than a competitive model, which I think has failed us, certainly in rural areas. You need a means of planning services with the public interest, working with the operators to deliver the kinds of service that we've outlining, and that's an organising brain, if you like. However it's done, that's what needs to happen. And our understanding of how the Swiss system operates is that certainly in a local level, I've done some work in the Oberengadin, which is comparable in size and population to where we are in the Hope Valley. And there is a sort of annual planning work between the municipalities, combined municipalities, the cantonal level, and the transport operators and the tourist organizations to say, okay, this is the rail service for the coming year. How we're going to tweak our bus services, what's been the experience the previous year, how do we plan and organize our bus services for the coming year? And no doubt there's a lot of discussion about money, about where the money flows as part of all that. But it's really important we get a new way of thinking about that organizing brain and the planning delivery. Final point to make just while I'm speaking, really important part of all this to think about the whole travel picture. Getting the active travel provision right is also really important. We know there's a lot of suppressed demand for active travel as well as for public transport use. If we get those things right, that's also important, as well as the much thornier issues about how you pay for driving. We become used in rural areas to paying for when you end up at a car park, but is there scope for taxing in some way or other car use within the national park? And technology now makes that possible. And personally, I think that's an important part of the way forward and something that we hope as an organisation to work on over the next year.
Thanks very much. Um, we're coming up to the end. Are there any final comments that you want to make? There have been some comments in the chat actually that you might want to look at about costs and taxes, about public perceptions, and about narratives. Did you want to each of you say something about the what you've heard, what you've said, and what you think the next stages might be? Roger, I'll start with you.
Well, thinking about what Jonathan's been saying to start with, really interesting about the smaller cities and their imagination and leadership in providing transport in the public interest, the kind of thing that I think many of us would think is really important. So how do we highlight the places where that's now happening in the UK, champion those, make sure they're reflected in thinking by Department for Transport, and encourage transport ministers, among others, to create the kind of positive messages about the benefits this brings for society, and look at what are the regulatory barriers to achieving the level of integration that we might want. You know, what's in the UK preventing the kind of model that Jonathan outlined and that I've been speaking about? Are there things that be done nationally and regionally? So encouraging inspired leadership, I think, on the part of our political leaders, rather than simply having more studies showing, well, it could be better because we could learn from elsewhere in Europe. And then encouraging those political leaders, we are part of Europe, and we may not be in the European Union at the moment, but neither Switzerland, but we can learn from best practice. So encouraging our political leaders to take a visit to Orléans or to Switzerland and see for themselves and talk to their political counterparts about how it works and how you do the hearts and minds stuff and achieve the sort of long-term culture change that's needed.
Thank you. Jonathan.
A couple of things on costs, which are kind of linked. I think the first thing is that I don't think I'm going to say much about the cost of various projects in the report I'm doing, because I think once you do that, you get into this kind of British mindset of going, oh, well, actually, that's far too expensive, or why don't we do that instead, and all the rest of it. And of course, costs do matter, but I don't want to go straight to that. I want to get people thinking about the motivation for why people are doing this, which often is not down to we looked at what was the most cost-effective measure to achieve this particular transport objective. But that's also linked to another thing, which, coming back to buses in particular, because there's a weird contrast between rail and roads and bus. So on rail and roads, money is no object really, both in terms of planning and the amount of executives involved in it. Whereas with bus, you say anything on bus and people start to go, well, what can we afford it? Is it too expensive? Or we've never done this before. I've never heard of a local authority go, no, we don't want a tram scheme because we've never done it before. We don't know how to do it. But I've knocked some of my houses down. Say about bus, and they go, well, never done that. You know, it's too scary. It's kind of, well, why have we got this split mindset? And we're not going to get quality public transport, particularly in less dense areas, without putting more money in. I just don't believe we are going to. It costs money, but we kind of trapped in this idea that bus is basically commercial, but unfortunately it needs some subsidy. No, it doesn't. If we want quality public transport, we're going to have to put more money into bus, and people should stop being so weird about it and start to think in the same way they do about rail and light rail, which is, yeah, it's worth spending that money, and we will put the resource in, and we will be brave.
Absolutely. Yeah, when I was campaigning for better transport, I remember suggesting that it would be quite a good idea to do a cost-benefit analysis of some country lanes and rural roads and see, well, actually, you should probably shut them as well, actually. So things like that. Beate, final thoughts from you.
I'm still on the don't be so weird about it. Yeah. Lisa Hopkinson popped something in the questions about are there economies of scale with integrated networks which offset some of the higher investment? And all I can say is Orléans is a very interesting example from, it is more expensive. They have a higher budget per person than Transport for Greater Manchester. However, the way that they use this budget is they give it to Keolis and they say, you must meet these KPIs. The transport must come 500 to within 500 meters of every single person within the Orléans metropole. And then Keolis decides how best to make sure that that actually happens. And it's a competitive system, so it could be another provider at a later date. But Keolis takes charge of the tram, the bus, the micro mobility system, the bike share system, and the DRT system, and make sure that this sort of complicated set of moving parts is integrated together. And I can't see that can't have some economies of scale, because you're not duplicating things, and it's an interesting and a different way of doing things. It's saying, we want this, go away and make it happen, not picking at the edges and making and picking, oh, we'll have a bus here, maybe we'll have a tram there, but it's like, no, make this happen as a system. And Orléans looks great. It's a great place to live, from everything I've heard, and that's got to be good.
Joan of Arc was right in the end.
Sorry?
Sorry?
Joan of Arc won in the end.
Oh yeah.
I'd like to thank everybody. We've run out of time. I'd like to thank all our speakers, Jonathan, Roger, and Beate, for what they've done and said. There will be links to, for example, the Hope Valley Climate Action, and to Roger himself, which we can post. And Jonathan's report for FIT will be available in the near future, and Beate will at some point publish her comparisons between Orléans and Swindon bus stop density and service. And there will be more things that FIT will be doing. And as I said, I'd encourage you to sign up to our newsletter, which you can do through our website, and to keep track of what we're up to through that and through LinkedIn, and through our website as well. So thank you all very much, and we'll hopefully see you at some of you at future webinars, where we'll showcase more work that FIT has been funding. Thank you very much. Great.